Good evening. Welcome to the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. I don't know if you can tell, but I am just so excited. Look at my face. Look at my face. Tonight we have Arla Collett Williams. Arla has a very intriguing story, and most of you out there know of Arla. And we have decided that with all the work she has done in the community, all the people that she has touched, all the people's lives that she has actually changed to help educate the people in the community. We would like to tell Arla's story, and Arla has agreed, and I am very honored. How are you doing tonight, Arla?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Uh, Tom really talks highly of you, so I'm happy to
Thank you.
be here.
Well, Tom's my second husband. Okay, I have
Yeah,
my
I
first husband,
heard
Johnny,
that.
and so
Yep,
you
I
have,
heard that.
but you're also a author too.
Yes, I am. I have two books. My Life with the Hairy People, which chronicles a big part of my life with them. But it's also got other things in it. I've got some little people stories in it. So, it's not totally about the Bigfoot people. It's got a little bit of other stuff in it. And then I have a children's book called Respecting the Water. And that is, there are two Bigfoot kids, Indigo and Blue, and there is their grandfather and a grandfather crow and a grandfather coyote and a human grandmother and her granddaughter are the characters in the book. And actually, all the characters are based on the reality of who I interact with. It's not all I interact with, but it is some of them.
Where can they find your books at?
You can find me on Facebook. I have them, Arla Collett, on Facebook. I also have a Facebook page called Naturally Arla. The books are there. And I also, um, you can get them on Amazon and a few other places, I think.
When we were talking about your story actually started with your grandmother. Would you like to start from there?
Okay. When I was 6, I was at my grandmother's. I was outside playing in the dirt. I was sitting down. I had sticks and some flowers and things. I was forever making houses and all kinds of things with sticks and flowers and rocks and whatever. And I heard someone walk up, and I thought it was my grandmother. Um, but when I looked up, it was a young male juvenile Bigfoot. And he walked up, 10, 15 feet, I'm guessing, from me. And we just kind of looked at each other for a little while. I knew he was a boy, that I knew. And he just turned around after a while and walked off. And I jumped up, I went in the house, and I told my grandmother what I had seen. And I asked her, I said, "What was that, Granny?" And she said, "What do you think it was?" And so this is the way I was taught. I was always allowed to think for myself. Um, it was after that, not long, that she began to teach me about them. So, yeah, she had her own knowledge of them, as well. She didn't do like a specific teaching. When I had questions, I could come and ask her. And she always wanted to know what I thought. So she let me form my own opinions about things and then guided me, through that. She never once told me, you can't believe that. That's just your imagination or whatever. I was free to talk about anything that I saw, and I saw a lot. So, I had her, which was a wonderful thing. It gave me someone that I could always talk about whatever with and not feel like I shouldn't talk about those things.
So after your first experience, initially, were you afraid?
No, no, I wasn't afraid at all. Um, I spent a good part of my time in the woods from the time I could run off and go to the woods. And I was a hard one to deal with for my mom because I was always running off outside and going somewhere. But seeing things that I saw in my life, I was never taught to fear anything. My grandmother always told me, if something comes to me or I see something and I don't know what it is, uh, talk to them, find out who they are. Um, and so I always did that. I was never taught to fear anything at all. And so even things that I didn't know what they were and saw them, I didn't fear them at all. I wanted to know who they were. When other kids were hiding under their covers because they heard something under the bed, I was hanging off the bed looking under to see what was making that noise. So, you know,
That was
I
fun.
just I wanted to know, what all is in this wonderful world. And my whole family looked at this world as a wonderful gift. And I was just taught that that's what it was, and that life was supposed to be happy, and you didn't look down on people. I never heard a bigoted word out of any of my immediate family ever about anything. So I didn't have a basis for looking at something as lesser than me. These were all potential friends out there in the woods that I could play with. And my grandmother, when she talked about the Bigfoot people, she said they're our neighbors. And sometimes we see our neighbors and sometimes we don't, so sometimes we talk to them. Sometimes we don't talk to them, but we're always to be respectful. She said that they were like us in ways and not like us in ways. And since I didn't have a bad feeling about something that wasn't exactly like me, I didn't have a fear or I didn't think bad about them either.
So when you were, to me, and I could be wrong, to me, your grandmother knew eventually you would discover what was out in the woods. This was in Oklahoma, correct?
Yes, yeah, and actually not very far from where I am now as a crow flies. So to get there takes a while, but if I were flying, it would take very long. Um, did she I think she did. I think she was prepared for it just because of my nature. Now she never taught my mom about them or ever talked with my mom about them. When I had the encounter, um, she knew then. for sure that this was going to start. And I think she was probably really excited about it. She never said that to me, but just knowing her and knowing that she had a lifelong um, time with them, that she and knowing me, and she knew that this was going to be something that was going to be important, that I experience in my lifetime. Now, I was also told we didn't ever talk about them. We didn't talk about them in public at all. You just didn't do it. You could talk with your family or people that you knew very well, but it wasn't something that you just openly talked about. So when it came time for me to begin to speak out and share, it was hard for me. I didn't have her then to help me. Um, she passed before I ever spoke publicly about them. And so I didn't have anybody I could talk to about this. And I just relied on Kashima, who is, he is an ancient. He is my teacher, but he's more than my teacher. He is like a grandfather to me. And his wisdom in dealing with what I had to deal with um, was so wonderful. And my grandmother told me about the teachers when I was young. I never thought one would come to me because I never thought I would need a teacher that would guide me to speak out or do anything. So um, yeah, it surprised me too when he came, but he knew too that I was going to need that guidance. I had a good foundation for measuring myself. I was raised to measure myself only by myself and not by what other people say or do or have. Um, and so that wasn't a problem for me coming into this. But it just, he has taught me so much, and we've talked about so many things in this universe. And, um, he just has this wisdom of a grandfather. And for me, that's just so special to me.
So I think the very first thing that would come to mind, and especially after I looked at your grandmother's picture, I actually could feel her energy. Just she has a strong energy in that picture. When you come out and you first started speaking about your knowledge and your experiences, I can imagine that she was smiling about that.
Oh, yeah. And there were many ways that we communicated, even though she wasn't here where I could actually sit down and look at her. I still feel her energy very strong. And I know that she guides me as well. Um, it When I first started sharing my experiences with the public, I it was very interesting because I just shared what I knew, and that included what people call paranormal. It was normal for me. The paranormal in my life didn't exist. It was all normal for me. And so, yeah, but in this realm of researchers, uh, they wanted some kind of proof, and and of course, I was called a lot of different things, which never really bothered me, actually, because I did measure myself by what they said. I knew I was supposed to share, and I wasn't going to pick and choose what I shared. The truth of something is only the truth if you tell it all. If you only tell a part of it, it's not the full truth. And so for me not to talk about those things would not have been a respectful thing for me to do in how I was taught and what I believe. So I know Tom and I, we were called all kinds of things. And in 2012, the conference that was held in Richland, right before that happened, there was a group on Facebook that had called us kooks, that we were kooks and we were going to be at this conference. And it was kind of funny when we got to the conference, the first morning. A friend and I, Beth, were going down to eat breakfast. And when we got down there, there was a couple of guys, Tom Powell. A lot of people in the Bigfoot world know Tom Powell, and Guy Edwards. And Tom said, "Why don't you girls sit and eat with us?" And so we sat down, and Tom said, "Well, Arla, what's going on in your world?" And it just popped out. I said, "Well, Tom, I'm upset." And he said, "Well, what's wrong?" And I said, "Well, this group has called me and Tom kooks. And I'm not a kook. I'm a kookette." And he and he said, "You got to tell people that." And so I do share that story. But, that that did not bother me, that they called me that. I mean, there was a lot of other things that we were called, and that was okay. And and I would tell people when they would talk about how crazy I was or whatever, that if you people didn't mention my name, there'd be a whole lot of people who didn't even know who I was. And so those people that wanted to know about this cookette, and what she's talking about, would find me that might never have found me
Oh,
otherwise. So it was for a purpose. There wasn't a whole lot like me out there um, openly talking about it. There were a few. Um, and so I ended up being on podcast after podcast after podcast. And I've made it a rule, don't ever watch the live chat. Just share your stories and let it be, you know.
so you've hit on a few things that I just have a passion for. When someone first has an encounter or a sighting and they come into the Bigfoot community, and don't get me wrong, I've never, how you say, insulted or I don't know a nice way. I've never not believed someone, but the more I got into the Bigfoot community, the more I become just as a nag. I mean, I become just as bitter. I just consume that energy where I just become one of those people. I wouldn't say I tried to hurt people or was mean to people, but I become one of those very argumentative where I would jump in on an argument and this and that. And I realized I become one of those people. I was like, I don't think I like me like that.
Yeah.
But when people have that experience, experience, they come into the community and they're trying so hard to figure it out. And then you have a world out here outside of us that they don't believe. So there's really no one out there you can talk to. Then you come into the Bigfoot community and just the drama and some of the comments are so cruel. There's a lot of people that never get their answers. And when I hear woo, I really don't like woo because it kind of consolidates all the thoughts and actions to one to where they're all dismissed. But I have found that what I did not believe 5 years ago, I'm now saying I'm going that
Yeah.
way. Where would you tell someone that might be flipping through the YouTube channels and happen to, if you see the camera shaking, Swamp Kitty has escaped. She's over here. What would you tell someone trying to come into the community to find answers, or what's a good start for those people? Because they jump right on into Facebook sometime. And it's like jumping into the riptide.
Well, I said years ago that I felt like when I came into this, I was dropped in down among the Philistines, which, if anyone knows anything about the Bible and the Philistines, it had to do with taking control over something else. And one of the things, and I say this at every time I speak at a conference, even in the Flash of Beauty Paranormal Bigfoot, at the end of that, what I have told people for years is, you don't have to believe anything I say. I'm not asking you to believe me. What I will ask you is to just take it and file it away. And maybe at some point you will have something happen, or someone that you really trust will have something happen. And then you've got a reference. You can go, whoa, wait a minute. I heard this. And what I tell people who are going to come into this Bigfoot world of researchers is that, you need to have faith in yourself and what you're telling. You are going to be questioned, and that's going to be part of it. But nobody can take that experience away from you. You
Absolutely.
had that experience, and there are a lot of people out there now that you can talk to. There's a lot of groups now that you're safe to tell something. And it became well known in the community that people could talk to me. They could tell me anything, and I wasn't going to tell them, oh, you're lying, or that's not right, or anything. I'm not about to tell anybody their experience wasn't real. I can't do that. It wasn't my experience, it was theirs. And I talked to a lot of people in this Bigfoot world of researchers that did not want anyone knowing that they were asking questions about woo. And that's important. If you go into a group and you've got something to say, read in that group and see how that group answers other people. If you don't feel like you're going to be respected, then find another group, because there's a lot of them out there that you can say pretty much, and their moderators and things are going to make sure nobody's, coming down on you for sharing an experience.
So you had your first experience at 6. How long again, or how long did it take you to have that experience again? And was it with the same Bigfoot? And what was the first thing you learned from him? That
Well, that actually wasn't my first experience, but I didn't realize that wasn't my first experience until a few years ago. My mom and I were talking just about, I'd been to a conference and we were talking about the Bigfoot and things. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, Arla, do you remember when you were 3 years old and we lived," and she said, where we lived, and I was getting the clothes out for the next day in the closet, and your dad was taking a bath, and you were sitting on the bed talking to someone, and I came out of the closet to see who you were talking to, and there was a dirty, hairy man looking in the window, and you were talking to him. Do you remember that? And I said, "Yes, Mom, I remember that very well, because I remember Daddy trying to get his pants on, and he ran through the kitchen, and he got a butcher knife, and he took it off, out the door. Of course, he didn't find anything. And then Mom, she looked at me and she said, 'Do you think that was a Bigfoot?' And I said, 'Well, Mom, what do you think?' And she said, 'I saw a Bigfoot.'" I said, "Yeah, Mom, I think you did."
so
But
your grandmother and your mother shares that same kind of flow, and you just that's good positive reinforcement. I don't know how to
so
say it. I'm bad with words, but that's how
yeah.
it come out.
Well, with Mom, we didn't talk about it, and I didn't talk about it with Mom at all. And for years and years and years. And then after we started talking about it, um, she still had questions and things. And she had asked me, she'd say, "Well, why didn't Granny talk to me about them?" And I said, "Well, Mom, I guess she wasn't supposed to." Plus the fact that my mother was scared of everything.
And you
So
were the one
I'm
looking under the bed.
yeah, I'm not sure she would have been as easygoing, I guess, with it. But my life with the Bigfoot people, um, it was that thing. I was always in the woods, always. They were there. Um, and it was pretty much like, I know you're there, and I'm talking to you and whatever. And I would see them, from time to time. And so it was like they were my neighbors. And sometimes I would see them when I was out, and sometimes I wouldn't see them. And so I didn't feel like I had to see them all the time. It wasn't like this great obsession that I had to interact with them. They were just part of my life, when I was in the woods. And I didn't talk to my kids about them. They did not show themselves to my children. And so I did not teach them about them. And that's the thing with learning about them and doing what I do. Now, pretty much anybody can see them. But to have a commitment that it takes to do what I do, as well as many others now do, um, there has to be, I think, something that was going to happen anyway. And so they knew that. And, that's why why he came. I was already not into fear. I didn't have fear. And so, I was very easy. I was very inquisitive about everything. I wanted to experience everything that was in the woods or, wherever. So, was I predestined to do it?
Are you there? This is why we call it the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. I can see you down there, Arla. I just don't see your camera. Can you hear me? Oh. Anyway, I first met Arla in Sanford, North Carolina. She had her books out there. That was the first Bigfoot conference I ever went to. And she was so nice, and she had her books there. And I remember I could not afford one, and I really wanted one. But she was just so nice, and you could tell she was just such a good person, a good-hearted person, and just her mannerism and the way she talked, you could feel a really. I'm big on energy since I got older. I mean, everything has energy. Every people is, animals, things, everything has energy, and she just had the best energy. And to be able to speak with her tonight has been one of the greatest gifts that I could do on the show, and to share her experience. Because if you are a non-believer and you don't believe in, the mind speak and all these other things, as you go on your journey, what you don't believe today, her words are going to make a lot of sense to you. So I hope you really listen with your heart, because you will see down the road everything fits together. Thank you. Arla, it's okay.
I don't know. I don't know where I went.
It's okay. That's why we call it the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show.
I'm good with that, actually.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Um, that's okay, because, normally it's Swamp Kitty that takes the camera out. And tonight she jingled it, but every time we lock her up, she tears the room up. So she's a wild thing that doesn't like to be confined either.
I know how she feels. I wouldn't
Yes.
like that either.
When
So
when I was born, my grandmother, from the day I was born to the day she passed, she called me Wild Child. And listening to you going into the woods and your experiences and how you would look under the bed when everybody else was jumping under the covers, I said, you know what, my grandma would have really liked her. But we were
oh,
going in, we were going into well, we're talking about your journey, but one of the things I really wanted to ask you was, what was the first lesson that really stays in your mind that you still carry with you, that you learned from your experiences and your teacher, or even your first experience? I guess he was a juvenile.
it was a juvenile was with my first experience, a little male. I was like, that's some hairy kid. So, I actually have seen him since then. So, at many times actually. So he's still, a part of my life not a constant part, but occasionally. They just by how they live uh, is just an awesome lesson. And they can live as they choose on the earth in what I call a 3D life, which is what we live, a flesh and blood life. And they enjoy that. From everything that I've seen, they enjoy that. They love this earth. And that's something that I always loved anyway. So, most of what I learned growing up with them was just validation for a lot of the things that I already felt and had been taught by my grandmother. It wasn't like when I was growing up, there were these great things, that I learned. When Kashima and I started working together, then he will just say things. And one of the things that he said very early on was, do not put your thoughts as a human onto how we should be. So don't look at them and say they have to act like this, because they are not that. And that was one of the things that I remember him telling me that. And people do it, but we do it with everything. Tom's word is anthropomorphize. We try to make everything human and look at it from a human standpoint, but we are in a human state. And so we do that. To look at them, we have to get outside that. Yes, there are many ways that they are like us, but there are many ways that they are not like us. He said something to me years ago about this, people saying, well, we're going to have more and more and more people get this right and understand and think from their heart and be looking at this earth as something that we are supposed to care for, and we're supposed to care for each other. And he said that it is no longer about the quantity of those who are doing this, but the quality of those. And I heard Jonathan Goldman say that a week or so ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, because she said that very thing years ago to me, that it's no longer about the quantity, but it's the quality of these people who are learning from them and who are understanding that there's so much going on that we just have to open our hearts and shift our paradigm. I've told people that for years. If you want to know about them, shift your paradigm. Don't stay in that old paradigm of this is a flesh and blood ape who is just undiscovered. Shift your paradigm and start looking at some of those other things that happen and just accept that it happens. You don't have to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh my gosh, I saw this, and but just accept it and let it be.
You don't have to have all the answers.
No, no. The only time we're ever going to have all the answers is when we're not here. So, and the ancestor grandmothers who are ancient women, and they have been with me all my life. They told me years ago that we do have all the answers within us. We're just waiting for the questions. But we'll never in this lifetime be able to know what all the questions are, even though it is within us to know that. And then when we leave this life, then we do know it's there. So, no, we don't have to know everything. We can just. Another thing Kashima said was, don't try to live in our world 24/7. And that's my paraphrase of what he said, because we don't need you totally, living in this. We need you to be taking what you've learned and sharing it.
Sorry. I had a swamp kitty got a little rambunctious. Please, please repeat that, because I am so sorry. That is so disrespectful. You said the last thing you said, he said, before I had to spank Swamp's kitty. And no, I don't abuse like that now.
Well, that, we have all those answers within us. And, the grandmothers had said, you have all these answers, all the answers are within you. You're just waiting for the questions. And in this lifetime, we will never have all the questions. But when we leave this lifetime, those answers are right there for us. And those questions, are there.
You were saying something that he said to you about about being in their world 24/7.
Yes.
You kind of,
He had said, and I said, this is my paraphrase of what he said. Don't try to live in our world 24/7. And what he meant was, don't let us and learning about us consume you, because you need to be out sharing what it is that you've learned. If we're just totally lost and consumed by trying to know more and more and more and more, we end up losing ourselves. And through the years, I've seen many people lose their livelihood, people that they loved, just because they had that obsession to prove them or to know everything about them. And so, that, and I go back with that to what my grandmother said about them being neighbors. We don't know everything there is to know about our neighbors. A lot of stuff, none of our business, So if we just sit and accept what it is that we're given, it's just so much easier. And the main thing is, we are learning about them, and that's important. But if you have shifted your paradigm and you've opened your heart, you're going to end up knowing more about yourself and who you are. And that is the main goal, is for us to know who we are and what it is we're supposed to be doing. And I'm not talking about some grand design of all these people flocking to hear, you talk or whatever. I'm talking about living your daily life in a good way.
Where do you think our boundaries need to be set when it comes to trying to be in their homes, in their habitat? What kind of boundaries do we need as people to
We just
not?
need one thing. We need to be respectful. Kashima said, "Ye humans, you don't respect the water. You don't respect the air. You don't respect the earth. You have no respect for each other. And the worst is you do not respect yourself. If you don't have respect for yourself, you're not truly going to be able to understand what respect really is. And your intent of anything that you do when you are trying to approach them uh, says it all for your experience and what you're going to understand. I remember, I started telling that from day one, I guess, when I started speaking. And, you know, someone one time made a remark and said, "Well, I guess then that you're the Aretha Franklin of the Bigfoot respect." I said,
That's a good one. I would wear that
like
T-shirt.
that. I
I would
like
wear that
that.
T-shirt. I would wear that T-shirt.
So that's what it's about. It's about having respect for yourself, for your neighbors. I'm not saying that you have to respect anybody.
Mhm.
I'm saying that when you are interacting with someone, that you speak in a respectful manner. And there's a lot of people that have a problem with that. Um, Through all the years that people had a problem with what I was saying, I never once spoke disrespectful to anyone. And I was taught that, as a young girl. My grandmother called that acting ugly. And she would tell us kids all the time, don't act ugly. That's not right. And, so it was something I learned growing up, and it has just been taught in so much a deeper way with Kashima talking about about that. So, I tell people all the time, if you go to the woods, go with a respectful attitude and a heart. You're not going to do anything wrong if the intention is from your heart. You can't disrespect if the intention comes from your heart. And and just see what happens. And if you feel that they're there and it gets, a little scary, then start talking. Talk to them. Tell them who you are. Tell them why you're there. Like you would anyone you wanted to get to know. Uh, Talk to them. And, if you can't get past that fear, it's real simple. Just turn around and leave until you're ready, to look at that and understand. The thing with experiences that people have with them, the experience we have has to do, for the most part, with what we believe they are. If we filled our head with man-eating monsters and they're going to come and rip us to shreds or whatever, then we could have an experience that is scary. There's a story I tell about this young man who was with us. Several of us were camping down in the Comanche Mountains, and we were all sitting outside around a fire. And as I do often, I get up and walk off into the woods or down the road by myself. And it was about midnight. And I decided I was just going to go walking. And this young man said, Miss Arla, can I go with you? And I said, sure, come on, go with me. And he had told me during the day that he really didn't know what they were. And he was a little afraid of that because he didn't know what they were. So we continued down the road and we began to hear heavy bipedal footsteps coming closer to us. And as we walked a little ways, it became louder and closer until just inside the tree line, which was a lot of cedars and pines and other bushes, he had stopped. Well, we had stopped, and I was just listening. And the young man reached over and he grabbed my arm and he said, are you afraid? And I said, no, I'm not afraid. Are you afraid? And he grabbed me with his other arm and he said, yes, I'm afraid. And I don't know what it's trying to do to me. And so I tried to talk to him and calm him down, but that wasn't working. So I said, well, let's just go back to the fire. So, if you look at that and you get two reports, mine's going to be I'm walking off down this little road and I hear heavy bipedal footsteps coming and he stops right, inside the tree line. And I'm just there listening. Well, his is going to be, oh my gosh, I heard these heavy footsteps. They were coming closer and closer to me. And he was standing there and I didn't know what he was going to do to me. He already had it in his mind that he didn't know what they were and that he had a fear. So instead of being able to stand there with me and just stand and listen, he freaked out because he already had it in his mind that they could hurt him. So his experience became what he already had in mind about them. And that's what happens time and time and time again with people. What you feed your mind is how your mind thinks. And if you're watching all these podcasts and everything else that's talking about people being chased or afraid, or they're trying to get in my house, or they tried to get in my travel trailer, I can assure you that if they were really trying to do that, there wouldn't be anything you could do to stop it. So it's, but it's that mindset. And because she said, that they come to us in our belief at that time. And if we can open our mind and our heart and begin to release some of those things, and a lot of it about fear, then we will begin to learn more and more about them, and again, about ourselves. And so if we're feeding ourselves fear, that's going to be how we react.
One last question, because we're going on an hour, and I think you have a lot to put out there. What's the biggest threat to them?
What's the biggest threat? We're no threat. We're no threat to them. it'll be up to them to decide. They're in charge of this whole thing of being proven. If, if that ever happens, it will be because they chose for it to happen. Can they be killed? Yes, they can. But that's a very rare thing to have happen. The biggest threat to them is for us not to see who we really are because they really care. I mean, look at how many people now are being contacted by them, either in the dream time or they're having encounters, or so many ways. And I see so many people positively learning things. And, for me, that really excites me to see those things. I never get tired of hearing people's stories. I never get tired of watching their journeys and their transformations. I've got to watch a lot of very special people's transformations from this is an undiscovered ape in our woods to, oh my gosh, what a wonderful thing
I
this
can
is.
relate. I can
Yeah.
relate. So I asked you at the beginning of the video if you would like to pay a tribute to someone. Have you decided to, if you would like to do that
Oh
or
my
not?
gosh. I could, I could talk about so many people in my lifetime. Of course, Tom and I go way back. We went through so many things together. I mean, he was the Pope of Bigfoot, and I was the Immaculate Mother of Woo at one time. So, he became my brother, and I call him my brother, and he will always be my brother. And I know that if I needed anything, he would make sure that I had it. It wouldn't even be a thought. One of the things that I've done through all these years that I've been in this is to have some awesome brothers. I got a lot of brothers and I
Yeah.
got a lot of sisters too. Um, and so the people who are in my world are amazing. And that grows every day as I watch the quality of us humans rising and rising. And I really don't have words to express exactly how that makes me feel.
Well, I think that you're a very amazing person. I think Tom is amazing. He speaks highly of you. And I think the bonds you form and the friends you meet along the way can have a lasting, she just will not stop. Will have a lasting, I just, yeah, I'm sorry. Will have a lasting effect on you in your life. And when I look at Tom and, when he talks about his friends, the ones that have made an impact in his life, he gets this little twinkle in his eye and his voice just changes a little. It's just a little bit happier, a little bit upbeat, more upbeat, and this smile starts to creep, on his face. And I think I could be doing the show 10 years from now, or I could be going, out in the forest 10 years from now. I would be lucky to have the friendship the two of you have and that kind of bond. I think that's something rare to find, and I think you both were blessed.
Yes, we were. He always tried to protect me, and I would always tell him, Tom, don't do anything that's going to put you in disrespect because people are going to try to get you to do that. But it was in his nature as you know, to protect me. We've had a lot of fun in our lifetimes with each other. And we could just laugh, just do nothing but laugh about silly things. And you know, when Tom and I met many years ago, he didn't know a lot about other things. He, you know, Bigfoot had always been something that was very much important to him to know more, you know, about them. And so, you know, I was the one that was talking about a whole lot of other things that are out there. And you know, so yeah, I am blessed to have him a part of my life. And I don't know what I would have done without him. I really don't.
Well, I think we have just touched the tip of your journey, and I hope that you will come back and we can finish the walk through your life and your journey. I just think that that would just educate a lot of people, maybe change a mind out there for someone that just is kind of closed minded right now, or help someone who's trying to find their way. And frankly, I think it would be very interesting just to learn, because I've learned a lot, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll see you back. I'm going to end the recording, but just stay on for a moment with me if you don't
I
mind.
will.
Thank you.